Well, good morning, everybody. How's it going today? Welcome to Ellensburg, Washington, USA, on a Saturday morning. Central Washington University, first floor of Discovery Hall. The local time is 8:49, and we will begin Session Z, North Cascades, in about 11 minutes from now, top of the hour. Thank you for joining us today. I hope that you enjoy the session. I'm trying to calm myself down. I just had a little incident, which I'll share with you, but let's first of all say hi with everybody. Look at that, 5 by 5 already, 430 people. Hey man, it's the last show. We'll have a few extras, I suppose, today. Folks that maybe have tuned out for the last couple of weeks, and you're like, oh yeah, well at least I'll show up on the last one and see what's going on. So if that's you, welcome back. I got 3 people I have to invite by email, but I'm going to say just I don't know, a handful of hellos here. Dead Crows in Canada, good morning. Don, Mom, hi Mom. Boy, it is a special morning. Even my mom, who rarely shows up in the live chat, is here. Mary Zentner, good morning. Oscar in San Diego, Steve Miller, Kathy, scrolling too fast, Cindy in Waldport, Oregon, William in Natchez, Washington, Elaine is in New Mexico, Denmark, yeah, too fast. Okay, so I'll tell you my little incident that I just had 3 minutes ago or so, and then I'll email the guests, and then we'll go back to saying hi's with others. So yesterday at noon, I gave a special presentation with Nat Nickel. Do you remember Nat? Nat, the guy who rode in on his white horse and saved my bacon involving hotkeys and going to the iPad and switching cameras and doing all sorts of stuff. Do you remember? I was really struggling. And so it was before Christmas that Nat really experimented with me and gave me all sorts of options, and much of the technology and the live guests and everything is all due to Nat Nickel. So thanks to him. However, we did it through Zoom yesterday, and it was Nat and I, and we were broadcasting to people on campus, basically people in his department, his technology department, and other professors who wanted to, learn what was going on. And he screwed up the thing. Nat, thank you. But I forgot to ask Nat to get the iPad back to functioning with my normal thing. So I can't get the iPad to work. So that's nothing new, right? That's nothing new. But I think I might actually hold the iPad up to the camera. So what was the emergency? I'm like, oh God, I don't have the iPad. Even before we start, I can't get it to communicate. And so I ran down the hall and printed out a bunch of stuff, and the photos looked crappy coming out of the printer. So I think that's what I'm doing. I think I'm going to hold the iPad up to the camera, so that'll be a first. So anyway, what else is new? There's always something. At least I'm less flustered than I was a couple of years ago. Burping into the microphone. Excuse me, Mom. Okay, I got to email 3 people. This is new. All right, so I got to concentrate. So thank you for being here. I'll say hi to a few more in just a second. Bob Miller. Email goes. Stacia Gordon. Email goes. Michael Patterson Eddy III. All-American. Email goes. Receiving an email from who? Chris Mattinson. Hey, Chris, would you watch the show instead of emailing me other stuff, please? All right. Coming over here. Muting that screen, which I always forget to do. Oh my God, we got Bob in the green room already. Hey man, nice job. Didn't go to your junk folder. Excellent. Oh, I didn't want to do that. Hang on. Maybe I am flustered. 600 here. That's a record. 600 before we're even starting? Okay, I'm going to scroll back now and say hi to as many folks as I can. I have one very brief thank you. I hope I don't forget before we start. Scrolling way back. Mr. Tony in Canby, Oregon. Hello. David in Severe Belt. Ray is in Silverton, Oregon. Regine in France. Hello. Eagle River, Alaska. The Chugach, that's Wallace. Gordon is in Glasgow, Scotland. Hello. Turvish in Menan, Belgium. Good afternoon. Good evening to you. Charles said I better watch my language. That's true. My mom's here. Although she's heard, yeah, okay. Now kind of scrolling our way a little bit. Trevor's in Nanaimo, British Columbia. Jeff's in Eau Claire, Wisconsin. That's French. Hi, Jeff. Stefano is in Italy. Hans, talking to my mom. Okay, she's regretting that she chimed in live, I'm sure. Oh, my God, they're all talking to my mom. Okay, sorry, Mom. Sorry. That's it with the mom thing. All right, we're done with that. I'm scrolling down to live. I can't see you guys all talking to my mom. Embarrassing. Bob's in Kamloops, BC. Eric is in Fort Dodge, Iowa. Good morning. Santosh in India. Hello. Special shout out to you. Thank you for coming back. Patrick's here. Age 8. Good morning, Patrick. I'm glad you're with us for the last show. Hoping to see you sometime this year. Ian in Murrumbina, Melbourne, Australia. Den is in Dorset, UK. Kirk in Philomath. Larry in Angola, New York. I'm talking like a computer now. I don't know why. Hal. Cheryl's from Aberdeen, Washington. Put some feeling into it, boy. Talk to these people. Sophie's from Fort Bragg, California. Good morning. Joe says good morning. Matt in Napa, Oregon. Backcountry Gary says hi to Patrick. I'm saying hi to you, Backcountry Gary. Thank you. I've got a special thank you to you. Patricia Wong from Portland. Hi, Patricia. I remember that river trip we did a few years ago. Kirk in Göteborg, Sweden. Hi, Kirk. Good evening. Bevan in Idaho Falls, Idaho. Don in Madras, Oregon. Ann in San Diego, California. Richard in Bellevue, Washington. Still just have Bob in the green room. Oh, here's Stacia. Good. All right. And now we're waiting on the ever-elusive Michael Eddy, but we'll see. We'll see how we do there. Can I double check we're 5 by 5 because I'm still feeling a little bit off kilter. And while we do that, let me get my little quick thank you. Thank you for the report. This episode of Nick from the Classroom brought to you by Indigo Yoga in downtown Ellensburg. You've got to love it. Cherie down in Indigo Yoga says, you got to love it. Tell him Ned sent you. And by Binman's Bakery in beautiful downtown Ellensburg, Washington. Please, you've got to love it, Binman's Bakery. So, I drop into Vinman's on occasion on my way home. You know, get off my bicycle, drop in, say hi to Jeff or whatever. And now people are dropping off things at Vinman's for me to pick up, which is very kind. It's like some sort of halfway house now. So here's the card that was dropped off at Vinman's Bakery, just south of the campus of Central Washington University. And here's the gift. So thank you. I like your style. Simple, direct, and anonymous. So thank you. Here's to you. And here's to you all for joining us this morning. By God, we got Michael Eddy in the green room too, so we're all set there. A couple more quick hellos, and then I got to get ready. Ed is in Grand Coulee Dam, Washington. Hi, Ed. Geologically speaking. Hi, Todd, from Southern California. San Clemente, if I remember. Mick is in Eagle, Idaho. Bob and Kathy from Woodinville, Washington. Lord Onion from Northfield, New Hampshire. Leesburg, Florida. Belgium, hello Zazu. Honey Greg in East Tennessee. Geneva. John is talking about something about Vindmans. Everybody's talking about Vindmans. Depressed Optimist from Winona, Minnesota. 3 more and I'm done. Les, simply thanks for the series from the UK. Thank you, Les. Jennifer from Boise, Idaho. And Cindy from Austin, Texas. Okay, thank you. Would you give me 1 minute? I need to concentrate, get ourselves ready for today's show. Thanks again for joining us. Hope you enjoy it. Hot mic. Okay. Okay, you know what's going on today. You have a plan. It's not as wild as the Basil show. It's a little bit more structured. You have your 4 questions. Get to your 4 questions early. Frame it for yourself, frame it for the guest, frame it for the dream team. They need to know what you're going to do. Talk about Old Greenie first. Go to your 4 questions, then go to the iPad, which you're literally holding up to the screen, or camera. And then you got 2 other green boards. You're just lofting stuff out. That's all you're doing. You don't have to know it all. You're just lofting stuff out. You're lobbing, I don't know, are they grenades? I don't know. You're lobbing things out into the air, and you're seeing what the experts want to talk about. That's it. And this isn't the last show with these guys, so you don't have to nail everything down. Our goals are just modest. Just make some progress. That's it. Just make some progress. Move forward. That's all we're doing. You can do this. I believe in you. You can do it. You can do it. Good morning, everybody, and welcome. Thank you for joining us for Session Z. For our Canadian viewers, Session Z. We have 845 with us live, and we'll have a couple of hundred, I suppose, joining us in a second. We do have our 3 guests in the live green room right now, and they are the experts. I mean, essentially, I've been thinking about this North Cascades stuff for about 45 minutes. And Bob Miller's been thinking about it for 45 years. So, I mean, come on. I need to just make this quick and get to these guys. This is a rare opportunity. But these 3 folks in the green room who have deep knowledge don't really have any idea what I have planned. So I have to do my usual thing, mainly to frame our discussion and go to 4 basic questions that I would like to explore today. Let's go to it. I mean, this isn't our first show. So we've already gone through some data. We've already kind of like collated, compare, contrast between places. Hell, we were as far east as Montana. We were as far south. Last time with Basil Tikoff, we were down in, what was it, Utah, Nevada, looking at magmas and extension. We were down in the lower mantle. We were out in the Pacific. We were up in Alaska. So we've been around. We're not starting from scratch. But we're bringing it back to the North Cascades. It is true. And I want to talk about these 4 things. I wrote them out. Number 1, why are we getting all this crazy amount of extension during the Eocene? I mean, I hit that hard last time. Session Y, I was so adamant about that. And we went to Basil, and I just started going with Basil. We were all over the place, and it was my fault. I just kept following these things that he was saying. And we never really did circle back and try to really come up with a very specific answer to why we flipped this switch 53 million years ago and start extending the crust. What sort of plate tectonic answer do we have for that, or at least ideas if we don't have the answer yet? So I'm going to be seeing what our resident experts have to say. Basil got as far as saying there was a significant plate reorganization offshore 53 million years ago. Is it simply a dramatic change in oceanic plates offshore starting 53 million years ago to apparently instantaneously start this crustal extension in the North Cascades? Or is there something else going on that maybe Basil didn't appreciate because he's not a North Cascades guy? He's admitted that openly. He did in the last show. He says, I know Idaho and other places farther inland. I don't really know. North Cascades is kind of a blind spot for me. And we kind of got there towards the end of the show with Basil last time. He's like, why don't you ask the dream team? He could have easily just said, what are you asking me for? Why don't you ask the guys on Saturday? Well, we're going to do that. And we're also going to ask, because these dikes, these northeast trending dikes, are not just in the North Cascades, but throughout the Pacific Northwest, I'm wondering if we can learn a little bit more about what those dikes are telling us. And that's mostly Bob Miller that I'm going to go to first. I think I'm going to bring Bob in first, talk to Bob a little bit, then we'll bring in Stacia, then we'll bring in Mike. There are 2 new papers waiting for you at nickzentner.com. I'm not going to go there. One is a brand new paper, just published a few weeks ago. Miller and others, 2022, focusing on the Eocene dikes, but then, of course, regionally talking as well. I have 2 more questions, though. How do these magmatic flare-ups in the North Cascades differ from each other? We clearly know there's an age difference with some rather significant lulls in between these 3 magmatic flare-ups. But I'm wondering if anybody, when they get on screen with me, is willing to think about the bigger picture. And I don't even know if you can read this, but I'm wondering if our first magmatic flare-up, which is really not the flare-up that's being studied by this current grant, but I'm wondering if we can talk about it anyway, because we've been talking about the accretion of Wranglelia rather significantly throughout the winter. Is this a slab failure story to create these major plutons? Yes or no? What would we look for if we cared about documenting that? As we get to the late Cretaceous or the tweener magmas, which Mike mentioned before Christmas was not quite as voluminous, here are the names. These are the names of the plutons in the North Cascades, which I will continue to learn about with the help from our experts. Is that a subduction story? I think at least Stacia and Bob clearly see evidence for subduction during this time. Down here too, subduction down here too. They're both a compressional regime or transpressional regime. But then, of course, this has been the main focus this entire winter. Not just the magmas, not just the plutons, but of course all this other stuff that we've been hammering. Is this a subduction story? That's kind of how we ended it with Basil. Do you remember? I'm confident, but we'll double check with our experts. Is there really a subduction story for our Eocene magmas in the North Cascades? Yes or no? And if not, is it a slab window and a rollback story? Okay, those are the 4 questions. I simply want to do a few more things visually and a couple other quick things on the chalkboard, and then we go to our guests. Again, it's a rare treat. If you joined us late, there's a story here, but whatever, let's not bother. 45 degrees, cold front coming through. We're going to be back to winter-like conditions next week, it sounds like. You know how to get to these papers. Not secure, nickzentner.com. Click in the upper right. The brand new paper by Miller and others on the Eocene dikes just came out. Mike Eddy did a nice, sweet, short paper on the golden horn. That's also available to you. What I really want to show you is two things. First of all, just to remind you, you've seen many of these before. This is Gary. Can I go full? Backcountry Gary. I just want to rapid fire go through these photos one more time. This is almost like Cozy Fort days where I have a reflection. Thank you, Backcountry Gary, for all of your amazing photos. Gary was a longtime backcountry ranger in the North Cascades, both crystalline core, Wenatchee block as well as Chelan block. And he has annotated these for us. I've been using them for more than a year. And he's probably got a few more in his back pocket as we go to Baja, BC next winter. So I continue to come back to these photos, Gary, because of their beauty, but also as I continue to learn from the experts, I see more and more in these photos. Here's Aaron Donaghy country with the Chumstick Basin. So I'm also just showing this to remind you how amazing this landscape is, and I'm super pumped to get back out there, with or without members of the Dream Team. Straight Creek Fault will come into our discussion today a little bit. Backcountry Gary wonders if those dikes are late Cretaceous. Do we have multiple generations of dikes? I don't know. Are they all Eocene? Okay. You're getting seasick because I'm holding this thing up to the camera. But things just do not stop from Backcountry Gary. And we've made progress. I can see these plutons, but I know they're not the same age. And now one of our simple goals today is to try to tie some of these huge batholiths to a specific tectonic story. Thank you, Gary Paul. Thank you, Gary Paul, who studied geology at the University of Washington, by the way. But wait, there's more. Some of you have seen the photos or the video that I shot last summer when I really spent time with the Dream Team for the first time, Foggy Dew Campground. That was last summer, 2021. Well, guess who was at Foggy Dew Campground in 1985? Probably the same picnic table. So this photo was emailed to me last night by Frank, who was a student of Bob, and Frank has been a regular. He's probably in the live chat right now. Frank, thank you. You gave me the names of the other cats as well. I didn't have time to punch those in, but I mean, Bob has been doing this for a long time, man, and we want to take advantage of this opportunity. These are all from not only the brand new paper that you can look at after the show's done, maybe you've already been there, but there's another brand new paper that's not ready to be shared, but a few of these figures I've gotten permission from Bob to share. So I just want to give you a sense. Yeah, I assume this is Bob, maybe Paul, talking about how do we draft up this series of crazy Eocene events, and then I think this is a brand new diagram. Again, sorry it's so shaky, but some of this is available to you to study very carefully now. Some of these are from a paper that's about to come out, hopefully later this year. But the point is, there's a lot of this stuff kind of coming out or has just come out in published form that will advance this discussion. So I'm just trying to whet your appetite. This is all the stuff we've been talking about, and it's just so satisfying and thrilling, I think is the word, to see it all put together. These guys have been at it for a long time, recently, and this group here has just been slowly trying to ramp up to see it all being put together. So I guess by, I don't know, Christmas time, hopefully you'll have all of these details for you as well. And you're like, slow down. It's like, I don't think so. Just trying to get this out. So this is all great. Bob Miller, as I understand it, is kind of the motor behind a lot of this. I may have that wrong, but even the fact that we have the Ross Lake Fault Zone active with the Golden Horn and the Cooper Mountain batholith active, and then we kill that, and we decide to move abruptly to the south. It's all new. So I think it's okay to share this. This is maybe the tentative title, maybe it's the formal title that will come out later on. So you're not going to find it now anywhere, but hopefully by Christmas you'll have this in your hot little hands. Finally, Jeff Tepper sent this to me last night. And, oh God, how am I going to do this? I'm just going to give you a chance to look at it quickly, and then I'm going to read you the email from Jeff Tepper. Sent yesterday, Jeff Tepper, the guy from Tacoma, Mr. Eocene, Plutons. Hi, Nick. I'm pasting below a new plot I created a few days ago based on uranium-lead ages and geochemical data for eastern Washington granites that I think ties nicely into the crazy Eocene story. The y-axis is an element ratio, lanthanum to ytterbium. Oh, God. That is a proxy for depth of melting, think pressure. It's an indicator that garnet is present, and the higher this ratio is, the thicker the crust is interpreted to be. The plot shows the crust thickening beginning after 100 million years ago and peaking around 55 million years ago. After that, around 53 million years ago, we see a lower lanthanum ytterbium ratio as the crust collapsed and thinned. The colors on the plot distinguish Cretaceous versus Eocene plutons. But the real change is at 53 million years ago. These data extend across Washington to Idaho, and the timing would appear to tie in nicely with core complex unroofing. Your interviews with Caleb and Dave are part of what led me to try to make this plot. I'm flying to Florida tonight and spend a week with my parents and brother, but we'll try to log in to watch episode Z while waiting for them to arrive at the Key West airport. Tepper, are you at the Key West airport right now? If that fails, I'll catch the replay. It's been a great series, and I hope now you can enjoy a break and maybe just read a novel for fun. Cheers, Jeff. Two more things, and then we go to our guests. I have to show you this. So I've indicated my questions, trying to frame our discussion. The lulls to me are interesting. I don't know if I should be preoccupied with the lulls, and mean, in other words, these spooky quiet times in the North Cascades. What does that mean? Stacia in particular has been documenting sediment addition to magma systems and perhaps flaring up the magmatic activity. Is that only here, Stacia, or do we have sediment introduction at other times as well? I guess I did kind of cover this. Okay, two other quick things. And then we go to our guest. How many times has he said that? So the crystalline core, we know, is here between the Ross Lake Fault Zone and the Straight Creek Fault Zone, and we lose it when we get into the flood basalts, the German chocolate cake. We have the Chelan block that came rapidly up, rocketed to the surface in the Eocene, as well as the Wenatchee block, these two separated by the Entiat Fault. Each of these are strike-slip faults. These two guys have been offset by the Straight Creek, so we know that the continuation of these two faults are up here in British Columbia. My question, and this is more probably a teaser for next winter when we do Baja, BC, but my question is, and I tried this with Bob before Christmas, and I think I want to come back. Is this crystalline core in the insular superterrane or in the intermontane? and trying to think about that, does that help us or hurt us try to think about why these magmas are being generated? So I'll just try this. It might be a total disaster. I think you can see, yeah. So old North America, then we bring in a super terrain known as intermontane. That's been thrown around quite a bit. We haven't focused on it much because the accretion happened roughly 170 million years ago. Then we bring in Wrangeli and friends, otherwise known as insular superterrane. That accreted 100 million years ago. Then finally we bring in Silesia to build the Pacific Northwest. If I use blue chalk and I just use XC, not for cross-country, but for crystalline core, if the crystalline core is really in the intermontane, in other words, if the high country, the beautiful country in North Cascades National Park, where the Dream Team is working, if it's tied to the intermontane, then are we making plutons intermontane insular? We accrete insular 100 million years ago, and we have this fireworks, right? We have our first round of magmatic flare-up post-insular accretion. Here, if we like the cross-country team, here in the intermontane, is that a slab failure? That's what I'm asking. So if we bring insular in, and the subducting plate is therefore failed, this is Bob Hildebrand's idea, among others, are we generating our first magmatic flare-up in the North Cascades inland of this suture? And if we don't have the chemistry for that, or we have all sorts of other details in the geology of that first magmatic flare-up between 96 and 87, if it's really a subduction volcanic arc, then what kind of geometry do we need with our plates? What am I missing? Second magmatic flare-up is between accreting insular and accreting Silesia, so I don't know what to do with that, but it must be just an eastward subducting oceanic plate. But then when we finally bring in Silesia, I don't see how we can have a subduction story. Is it a slab failure again? And to me, the key is not looking just cross-section wise, but then turning our perspective and looking down. And now suddenly we're in Baja, BC. Because if you are a Baja, BC person, as Daryl Cowan is, and that was one of the moments this winter that I still recall vividly, Daryl said more than once, I think the crystalline core is insular. Daryl Cowan. And you're like, okay, big deal. Why is that a big deal? Well, if you're a Baja, BC person, you want the insular superterrane in Southern California at least, or maybe Mexico. And then you move it north. So, when we're looking at this stuff here, this is how we'll finish. Teasing you for next winter, Baja, BC is a concept of moving the insular superterrane from Baja, Mexico, up to British Columbia. And when does that happen? When does that northern transport happen? It happens between 85 and 55 million years ago. Accrete Wrangelia, accrete Silesia, but between those two major events, if you're Baja, BC, you're moving north during the time that you're creating these things. Can you see how crazy this can get? We'll see if we get to a triple junction migration, which is my fourth question. But I'm starting to realize I bit off too much for me to chew this morning. We'll see how it goes. It's 9:23, and I think it's time to get to our first guest. Bob, I'm coming to you. And I'd like to talk about these dikes. Stacia's on standby, and Mike's in the hole. Good morning, Bob.
Hi, Nick.
How are you today?
Oh, I'm doing fine. Nice,
That was a
quiet
nice
morning.
photo. Nice photo of you in 1985. Had you seen that one before?
Oh yeah. That I had that in my office. That was my first summer of having at San Jose State. So um, those had a bunch of students working up in that area around Foggy Dew,
Did you
including
recruit
Frank.
those? Yeah. Did you recruit those guys to work on the North Cascades, or you inherited those students when you first showed up?
Well, they were. I think they were orphans when I showed up. I think they might tell you otherwise, but they didn't have a thesis advisor at the start. And
Yeah.
you may be old enough, Nick, to remember those days when after gas rationing and that sort of thing, there were so many geology students. It was probably the heyday of geology programs, and we had a lot of master's students. And I got really lucky that there were some excellent students. Had those students and one student who worked down on the blue schist and green schist at Hicks Butte, not too far from where you are right now. So yeah, it was a very stimulating time.
Very cool. Well, you're still at it for sure. I mean, that I have to say that I'm just so impressed with you. You're not exactly 35 anymore, and you're still cranking out these papers and doing all this stuff. So, I mean, and you're not talking about the old days either. I mean, you're using the latest stuff. So, major props to you.
Thank you.
I got a question about the dikes, and I know you had much more in that paper besides the dikes, but I think what I learned from that paper, and this is the paper that everybody can enjoy after the show, and we've been thinking about these dikes for a while now in the Pacific Northwest. Caleb had them in Montana, Dave Rogers had them in Idaho, and then of course we have them here as well. I guess the main thing I learned from that paper, Bob, is that you have slight differences in orientation of dikes in the North Cascades, and you're tying them to strike-slip motion as opposed to the accretion of Siletzia. Am I getting that correct?
Yeah, well, yes, but it may be the accretion of Siletzia in the change in the plate vectors that's driving that. But yes.
Okay.
And then so I don't know that they're chicken and egg type things, that they're, or maybe that sort of thing, that they're closely linked, would be my interpretation.
Okay. As far east as Montana, we're still
Well,
getting...
that's I don't, that's one thing we didn't really address. I looked into it, but there aren't, one of the things that came out of just putting all the data together, and those dikes that many of us had ignored for so many years, or at least I had, because I was interested in the older rocks and the dikes got in the way, that finally dawned on me that maybe it would be worth putting this together and getting more data. Is, we've always sort of said, oh, they're northeast striking, but that's mostly based on the Teanaway. And I wonder if you went in Montana and Idaho and looked as carefully at dike orientations. So, for instance, the Republic Robin, which you talked about in northeastern Washington, and the rocks, in the crystalline rocks next to it in the domes, there are the dikes tend, the little data that I've seen at least published or mentioned, the dikes strike more like almost north-south. They're slightly northeast, but they do have a different orientation. I just wonder if people went to did a quantitative study like we tried to do, if they would see the same thing. But yes, there's variability, no question about it.
Well, let's talk about the variability and what you've done with that. So I don't have the iPad, but I've got these two, I think, from the paper. This look familiar. So you've got a set of these dikes. There's a lot going on here, but am I understanding that there's a generation of this particular orientation that's tied specifically to these faults, as opposed to a slightly different orientation of another set of dikes that are a little bit younger, that you're tying specifically to Straight Creek?
Well, yes and no. I think that
Okay.
that diagram is really to show expected orientations. That's sort of a textbook diagram on secondary structures related to strike slip faults. But
Okay.
what we're trying to show is if it's parallel, if you look at those structures relative to the Ross Lake and Eniet, since they strike northwest, whereas the Straight Creek tends north-south, then you would expect different orientations. So that was a figure really mostly designed to set up the reader to have an idea of context of, okay, what orientations we expect.
Yeah.
And then in transtension, that would rotate dikes or rotate the stress field, not necessarily the dikes, but rotate the stress field as you've talked about, several people have talked about. So it's pretty messy. In fact, the Straight Creek trend, or if you want to relate that to strike slip faulting as we do, this is a really old idea that the Teanaway dikes fit nicely for a model of strike slip with the Straight Creek fault. They're right next to where the Straight Creek projects southwards, and those are the most spectacular dikes, and they're easy to get to from Ellensburg. Since that's the center of the geologic world, I'm sure that's why.
That's right. Well, so one more thing, and then we're going to bring Stacia in, and we'll keep you on screen, Bob. When I read Mike Eddy's paper 5 years ago, I got all excited. I saw somebody young was working north of town, and I'm sure you were involved as well, but I didn't lock on you. I was just locked on Mike. And I gave this public talk downtown, and I've been giving this little talk ever since involving a coin purse, where I use this little prop, and I say, look, we're going to open these extension or these tensional dikes by squeezing in these two directions, and we're going to open perpendicular to that, and here comes this Teanaway basalt coming out of these cracks, basically. It's like a health class now, but you get the idea. And so I was trying to say, look, this is not strike slip at all. I wasn't thinking about strike slip motion at all. Instead, I was saying we're going to bring Stacia in, and that's our squeezing of the coin purse. And you're saying I can still run with that, or as I teach this in the future, I could somehow get the strike slip faults going at the same time? How would you do it if you're teaching a 101 class?
Well, that's I mean, I don't think I disagree with the overall. I think what we would add is that the strike slip faulting is playing a role. So, and that's important. I think for those who saw Tekla Harm's presentation, Tekla emphasized that her collapse, or her forget what analogy she used for the collapse. And so if you have purely collapse with the orientation of those core complexes, you would expect dikes to be striking north-south, right? Because if you're pulling apart,
yes.
And if you can see my fingers on the screen, my
hand's
right supposedly going to be moving east-west. So, so the dikes, as I said, I think, at least from the available data, the dikes a little farther east are more north-south, whereas we have more, at least in Washington. I'm only talking about the Republic-Robin area, which, as far as I know, I think it would be great for a senior thesis or a master's for someone to go in and really take that apart. But that would give you what you'd expect north-south dikes. So the fact that they're more northeasterly in the Cascades, that can fit with having a component of strike slip. And since we're near the plate margin, that makes perfect sense. And if you go back to the Eddy et al. Paper, to Mike's paper, that's his one of Mike's big conclusions was that strike slip faulting may have accelerated or even initiated. I would argue it didn't initiate, but maybe in the local area. And that's why the Chump Stick Basin starts to form right at the same time as the Strike Slip faulting, the Eniet Fault, and Leavenworth Fault, kind of in that interval as well, and arguably the Straight Creek Fault. So all of that sort of happens very close in time. At least we know they're all close in time. And then how we tie that together is another matter.
I got one more, and then we'll move on. A two-parter. So, can you think of some core complexes with the dikes coming right through? Like, is that can we call? I'll hold off on that. Forget I said that. How much rotation have these dikes done? Now, Ray Wells down here in Southern Oregon has got these things rotating more than 45 degrees, whatever, right? So, are we too far inland and too far north to have dramatic rotation in the last 50 million years?
Well, I think that's a great question, which hasn't been totally resolved. But there are paleomagnetic data that Merle Beck obtained back in his students way back, I think in the 1970s, right around when he was doing Mount Stewart, which started Baja, BC. And they found, at least in the late Eocene igneous bodies, that there was no within statistical uncertainties, no significant rotation. And that was based on, I think, the Granite Falls stock, which is kind of in that area that's northeast of Seattle with too many trees to see the geology well. But that they had some data there, and I forget what other volcanics I think they had. So from that perspective, the thought was, well, the rotation increases to the west and to the south. So no, but there was one other study, another really old study done in northeastern Washington by a fellow named Fox, a USGS fellow, and they did, and I think Merle was part of that too. They also found some rotation in northeast Washington. So it is a little confusing. How would the North Cascades not rotate significantly?
Okay. It always comes back to Merle somehow. We need to do Merle Beck A to Z, I think. I mean,
well, if you ever go look at the Tianaway, you'll just see there's lots on road cuts. We've probably been. There are lots and lots of holes in the rocks. And they did do paleomag on the Tianaway dikes, which are the most voluminous, but unfortunately they didn't yield interpretable results. At least maybe now with better technology, they would, but no one's done it as far as I'm aware.
Time is right. The time is right for some of that. Thank you, Bob. Let's keep you on. Let's bring in the other two. What the heck? Stacia and Mike, we're bringing you in, and we'll see if we can get this to work Brady Bunch style here. So let's go Stacia from Reno, Nevada. Hi, Stacia.
Good morning.
Thank you for joining us. Thank you for giving up your field trip. I don't know what happened with that, but it's a holiday weekend here. Did that just fall apart, or did you opt out?
Postponed till spring break.
Perfect. So. Perfect. Thank you. And now Mike from Indiana. Hey, Mike. How's it going today?
Hey, pretty good.
Good. This actually just snapped into 4 rectangles. Love it. So let's just make this happen the best we can. I think the goal, the goal is like we're sitting around the picnic table at the campsite and we're just talking, and there's no formality here, and people are finishing each other's sentences or whatever. So that's our goal, that we can just kind of have a discussion like we would anyway. And I'll start by saying this, so Bob just emailed this unpublished paper to me, which I am not sharing with anybody. But is there any part of this that you're kind of reluctant to talk about? Like you're like, I haven't published this yet. I don't want to say out loud what we're working on, like somebody's going to steal our whatever. Is that a thing, or are you kind of an open book? Anybody want to reply to that?
Let Mike. I've done enough talking.
Okay.
No, I don't think there's anything that we wouldn't be willing to talk about.
Good. I mean, I sometimes do feel like I'm this is kind of unusual. This really hasn't been done before, and I don't want to, screw up, basically, by having us talk. There's a decent audience for this, but you let me know if you want to keep anything.
Well, I'll add that
Yeah.
the version I sent you, you might have noticed there were in track changes, Mike and Jeff arguing with each other, Jeff Tepper, and not
so
arguing,
cool.
but so
Right.
it's not something we necessarily want to put out there. And there are no,
Right.
if there's no comments like what an idiotic thing to say, but nothing like
Right.
that. But there are some.
Well, of
I'm
course,
not
I
going
want
to
to
feel
go.
sorry for Jeff if he's down in Key West. So.
No.
That's right. That's good. Yeah, right. Well, you should. He's huddled in the corner of an airport with Wi-Fi trying to get this thing not to buffer on him. Okay. Stacia, I learned so much, not only from you, but from Tekla and Basil about these metamorphic core complexes. And I was in those shows I was saying, is the crystalline core essentially a metamorphic core complex? And I brought this up just casually with Mike and last summer, I think. Where are we with that? Should I just not think about what we know about the basics of core complexes at all when we're talking about your turf in the crystalline core?
I mean, it's not too far off. I think the main difference is just that we do have this major strike-slip component compared to the core complexes to the east. But it's still the same idea of the upper crust extending with the transtension, and then the deeper crust being more buoyant and ductily flowing and all that good stuff that you see in both the core complexes as well as the crystalline core. So similar processes, but just adding a major strike-slip component to it.
Okay, that works for me, except like right next door, we got this massive Shuswap complex, of course, the Valhalla that you worked on, etc. And don't we have I don't know, do we have an upper plate that's sliding westward off of this major turtle shell? And if that's true, isn't it sliding right into your field area?
Trying to think. I guess the whole thing, I guess you can think of it as an integrated system. Trying to think in terms of the directions of how it's sliding.
It seems like it's just an east-west thing, but maybe it's all sliding east. I mean, it just feels like there might be a connection between these two stories since they're just so close to each other, but I don't see anybody doing that, and I don't know what I'm missing with it. Because we have such significant offset on these faults at the same time, that is the reason that I shouldn't be connecting dots between the Okanagan and the North Cascades?
There's some of that. I think there's also a lot of intrusives in the middle that are younger and kind of hiding some of the story that's going on. Trying to think of another, I don't know.
Yeah.
Bob, do you have anything else to add?
Well, I would just say that if you project the Okanagan Valley or whatever, if you use the Canadian term, the normal fault zone, that would go well into the subsurface, and the Pasayten fault shouldn't be a problem. That's the big one farther east that bounds the Methow Basin, because it would be inactive. You would start potentially getting interaction with the Ross Lake fault zone if you tried to do it in 3 dimensions. Well, we really don't know. There were the geophysics, unfortunately, there was a big seismic line called CoCorp back in the days where we learned a lot of crustal structure. And it did all right in northeastern Washington, but because of the highways, they weren't able to go east, cross strike in the North Cascades. And for some reason, WASDOT, or whatever you call that, Department of Transportation, didn't want this giant machine going up over North Cascades National Park and sending off seismic waves. So we infer a lot from British Columbia. There's a lithoprobe line, something that was the name of the Canadian equivalent, where they went across the country and they imaged some of these faults And you can see even questions like what happens to the Ross Lake fault zone or its equivalent potentially on the other side of the Straight Creek Fraser, they actually show some of those faults flattening out at depth. Analogous Tekla Harms kind of went into that a fair amount.
Yeah.
So, but it gets pretty hard to interpret that lower crustal structure. So you can speculate all you want, but it would be in a hanging wall position. So that North Cascades would.
Yeah. Mike, let's involve you a little bit more. And again, I'm just throwing stuff out. We'll just see where it goes. It might be dead end. I don't know. So, of course, I have to go into what you and Tepper were discussing in the margins of this working document. Mike, you seem like a reasonable person, but you are against the grain with this particular triple junction migration story. And you're on record saying you're happy to discuss anything, so let's do it. So the idea is for our viewers is here's a I just took something an hour ago, spreading ridge, 2 ocean plates. Yes, we don't have offsets. Okay, fine. And please remember that if we have an ocean plate and another ocean plate with a spreading ridge in between out in the water, and then North America, we have a triple junction. My discarded coffee mug is the triple junction. Okay? So I put my finger, that's dumb. I can put my finger on a map where 3 tectonic plates are together. Now again, it's like I'm advertising for next winter when we do Baja, BC, but the Baja, BC people say this triple junction is real and it has slowly been migrating through time north up the coast. And generally the Baja, BC people say this is the Kula plate on the north side of the spreading ridge, and this triple junction migrates north through time. Mike, you don't like that. Why not? You want it going south?
Well, I'll give it a caveat. I mean, that's all fine with me, but I just want it up at like where Juneau is today by the early Paleogene. And so I guess I'll push back a little bit on the Baja. Like that idea is
good.
Like it's easier to work backwards from today,
right?
To figure out tectonic settings than to see that things were moving in the Cretaceous and then invoke that this is where a plate had to be in the Cretaceous.
Yeah.
And so if we just kind of forget that we need to move a lot of Western North America in the Cretaceous, which I'm willing to do, maybe everyone else isn't, but
yeah, we'll put it off till next winter.
If we start our world in the Paleogene, what we know is that there had to be a triple junction somewhere on the North American margin. We know.
So what? I'm sorry. What time frame are we? Paleogene, but could you give us a number, please?
Oh yeah, so 66 until the end of the Oligocene, I guess, which I actually don't know, 30, something like that.
Okay. So we're thinking hard about where that triple junction is between 66 and 35.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay.
And so we know that there's good evidence that it was interacting with this Chugach terrain, which you talked about with Daryl Cowan.
Yeah.
Okay. And that evidence shows that interaction was moving to the east and south across the Oreok line in Alaska.
Up, yeah, way up here. Yeah.
But but the Chugach has moved.
Right?
Maybe, And so if you slide back down next to British Columbia.
Okay, Chugach is here.
Yep. Then all you need is that single triple junction, which we know had to exist, moving down towards the south along the coast. And everything to the north of that is exposed to the Kula plate, which is really obliquely moving relative to North America. And so it can drive strike slip motion and translate things like the Chugach terrain to the north. And everything to the south has a bit more head-on subduction, and so there's a little bit less of an impetus for strike slip motion. And so our argument in Washington was we see Silesia accrete, and then we see a lot of dextral strike slip motion. Yep, exactly. And so it looks like that triple junction has popped down to the southern end of Silesia following that accretion event.
How far south you want to go, Mike?
Somewhere in Oregon.
Oregon.
Yeah, sure.
And so just to pause you, I want to keep going with this. This is great. I think what I'm hearing you say, and when I did this in my Geology 351 class last spring, we were trying to really think hard about this idea of a southward migrating triple junction, which is what Mike is saying and not many others are saying. I think what I'm hearing again from you right now is you have documented dextral right lateral motion on these strike slip faults, and you need an oceanic plate offshore that's doing that. Like the timing here you have to have the Kula offshore, but if you take the model everybody else is saying, they have the Kula off the map by the time that you're doing this. Is that the timing that is the problem?
Sure, or they'd have it like there, so they just have it in the same place but moving in the other direction at that time.
Okay.
So the one big complication which Basil talked about is that like the entire Pacific Basin goes nuts at this time.
Yeah.
So like,
Yeah.
and even the Indian Ocean Basin goes nuts. So India collides with Khoestan, Izu-Bonin arc starts, the Aleutian arc starts, like everything changes. And so all the plate vectors change at this time because you're opening up new subduction zones. You have new plates pulling in new directions as they subduct down into the Earth's mantle. And so the way he's absolutely right that we have to think about whether we're looking at a local or like a global story here.
Right.
But the thing that I would say is that, so we pop down that triple junction into Oregon, if you'll allow me. And then in order to get to the current plate configuration, we have to get it back up north into BC, because that's where its successor triple junction is today. And so this change in direction probably happened around when the Pacific Basin was reorganizing. All the vectors were reorganizing.
At 55? No, younger?
I'd put it younger, yeah. I'd say that happens at 50.
So to summarize, your time window that you've been thinking about the most, 65 to 35, let's say, are you kind of have a yo-yo? You want this triple junction coming south, and then you want it coming back north?
A long-standing regime that allows that triple junction to move south. So you got all right. So you got a northeast striking ridge, and you got North America.
Thank you.
North America's moving to the west, and that triple junction point just moves south. So that's totally fine. And then as everything reorganizes in the Eocene, as you open up all these new subduction zones, it allows it to move back north. And that's something that surprisingly I think is going to pop out of Aaron's PhD, is that we're seeing sort of evidence for the late Eocene, early Oligocene passage of that triple junction back to the north, which coincides with when we think the Straight Creek Fault shut down, which I think we'll be able to make a nice story, but this is like a few years out now.
Okay. Well, and one last thing there, and then we're going to go to Stacia. So you're pinning down the triple junction multiple ways, activity and timing on strike slip faults inland, but are you using near trench magmas like we were trying to do back in January? Is that part of this as well?
Yeah, I mean, that's most of the story for the Chugach terrain. And then, as Daryl pointed out, there's some in Washington and on Vancouver Island as well.
Are there some down here that you like as near trench magmas? I don't think I see that from other people.
Well, you're not going to... So the geology is different. So after you accrete Silesia, your triple junction is now intersecting your oceanic crust, your oceanic plateau. So there's no no sediment to melt there to get weird
Oh.
S-type granites like you would in the Chugach or like you would up in Washington.
So the near trench magmas look different. You can interpret them as near trench magmas, but they don't have the same chemistry as a burning hole.
Yeah,
through
and so the problem,
coast.
I feel like I'm droning on here, but the problem with
No, this is
Oregon
good.
stuff is, okay, so the stuff in the Chugach and in Washington, they're really weird because you're in the forearc, which is normally a super cold place, and yet the intrusions look like melted sediment. So they're like garnet and muscovite bearing, full of aluminum, not your typical granitic magmas. And so really, I mean, like the only way we know to do that is to pump a bunch of basalt into your normally cold forearc and melt some of the sedimentary material that's in, say, the accretionary prism. So if you accrete Stacia and now your triple junction is intersecting with that accreted Stacia block, you don't have sediment right where the triple junction is anymore, right? Now you've got an oceanic plateau or this wad of basalt. And so there you might have a triple junction, you might have a little bit of basalt coming through, but it's just going to be basalt erupted on basalt. And you know, that gets people going a little less well.
Well, I love this stuff, and it ties so much together with some of the themes we've been working on. And so part of this is going to be in black and white in this paper that's about to go into the pipeline, it sounds like. I think I kind of scanned it last night. So that's the paper that's going to be published, but hopefully by the end of the year.
Maybe Bob can actually we can pony up and get it in color. So.
Oh, see? You took me literally. And Erin's going to have potentially in her PhD thesis and then a couple papers in the next 3 years going to be kind of nailing this down as well, it sounds like. So that's something really to look forward to. Wow, we got the inside scoop there. That's wonderful. Thank you for sharing. Stacia, I want to involve you, and then, I don't know, then we'll just kind of talk about this summer and what the team is hoping to do, I guess. Stacia, I've avoided the sediment being introduced into the magmas to complicate things, because I don't think I still have it straight where the sediment's coming from on the back arc or the forearc or whatever. And I don't know if we want to go there a lot, but why do you have that sediment signature, or what do you have in these magmas that tell us that sediment is just being shoveled into that magma system? And do you have any hint of that sediment introduction in these other two flare-up events as well?
Well, we actually don't see that much evidence for sediment being introduced into the magmas in that 78 to 60 MA time period.
You don't?
You don't. Yeah. So we, from Jenny Matzel and some of my former student Kirsten's work, where both of them collected a lot of whole rock neodymium isotope data, it doesn't seem to show a big sediment input for either kind of the first or the second flare-up event. It's not until kind of the Eocene magmas that you start to see kind of the chemistry changing. And Mike can kind of answer more about those magmas. But yeah, that middle flare-up, we don't see it.
Well, I'm sorry I missed that. I thought that was the second flare-up that had that signature. Wow, okay. Well, I'm steering us towards the current grant. And so Stacia, well, let's talk about your roles one more time. Let's take a step back. And live viewers, what do we have? 1,100 watching, and we are coming to your live questions for all these guys in a bit, but I feel like I want to do a little bit more here. So to revisit the basics of this team, as I understand it, Bob is mostly strike slip faulting, Mike is plutons and geochem, and Stacia is metamorphic rocks in the crystalline core. But it's not appropriate to say that because you guys are collaborating on all sorts of things. So Stacia, how much of the strike slip story or the pluton story is clearly part of your work. You're not just metamorphic rocks, right?
Yeah, I would say I focus more on kind of studying those rocks in the field and collecting the analytical data from those particular rocks. But yeah, we need the kind of what Mike's finding out from those plutons and Bob's kind of overall mapping and structural kind of collection of data from across the whole crystalline core to kind of understand the entire system, because they all parts of it are so interconnected. And so I think what we're seeing for that middle flare-up time is, the sediment isn't necessarily driving a huge amount of magmatism, at least from what plutons and things are exposed to. There's all that magmatism that's happening, and it's actually probably really weakening the crust, and it's weakening it enough that that's what allows kind of the underthrusting of some of the sediment from the west side of the arc, from the forearc side, to be kind of dumped into that mid crust of the arc system.
Well, let's go there. So in the grant, which I tried to reread last night, and there's a lot in there. You guys speak a very specific language. Can you still hear me, you guys?
I can.
Okay.
Something's happened on my end.
Okay, well, we'll let you play a little bit.
Okay.
You're good. The rheology of the crust seems to be a huge deal for you guys. I don't understand why. Or can you, instead of saying that, how are we viewing the crust at these three different times right now? Is this is the thickening chapter, and it's strong, and then it's weaker here, and then it's disintegrates in the Eocene? Or why is the rheology important in your study? Anybody?
Well, so rheology is largely, so that just means like the strength of rocks, right? So how they're going to behave when you're trying to deform them, and it's largely temperature dependent.
Okay.
And so the idea is, right, like pump a bunch of magma and it's going to get really hot. So does that drive ductal flow? Like at the most basic level, like do you end up with a bunch of ductal deformation because you're heating this stuff up?
And then we can add to that the deformation is really going to partition into those weaker areas. And so part of it is kind of tracking how that deformation is changing through time, which is, as Mike was just saying, kind of very strongly linked to where the magmatism is focused. And then if you add in the metasedimentary rocks, they're also going to be really weak compared to the crystallized magmas, the plutons. And so then it's important to understand kind of where the sediments are and where they're kind of introduced relative to those plutons and magmatism and all that too.
And I guess I would add, one of the points you raised in your introductory remarks, Nick, is that flare-ups, what causes flare-ups is still a big question. They're observed through a lot of arcs, and the comments we made and the general idea of, well, sure, it makes sense. You put a bunch of heat in and you weaken it, and deformation should be localized. But do we really have very many examples where that's been documented, that we can say in an arc, well, bam, we had this magma come in and then these rocks deformed? Or did they start deforming a little before or after? And I don't think that's one of the great things, for me at least, working with Stacia and Mike, is combining our field observations with these quote unquote cutting edge techniques. We can really, our goal, whether we succeed or not, is always a question, is to really pin this down, the timing events, down to a pretty local scale, maybe even down to the kilometer scale or 10-kilometer scale. So can we show deformation within the Skagit and ice varying in time, but very precisely?
So that's interesting. So if this was a huge magmatic flare-up, the first one, why wouldn't there be a bunch of evidence of core complexes at that time? Or you're just talking about deformation being totally different from ductile flow and core complex stuff? It's just folding of units? What am I visualizing for deformation after we have a big heating up event?
Well, I think in the where I spent a lot of the first half of my career working in the Wenatchee block. I'm sure there's a lot of relations. Scott Patterson and I worked on the Chewaucum schist and various units near the Mount Stewart and in the Ingalls. But trying to pin down there, with the available data, we can make some statements, but no one's done that kind of work that we're proposing. And this was a compressional in the mid-Cretaceous. This would have been compressional. People can debate about what caused it. So we don't have the core complex development. Perhaps if it's driven
right, of course,
by crustal thickening. So that would be that would be another area. That would be another part of the crust that would be really interesting to look at. But we think with the Skagit area that from the geochronology that's available from multiple people, including Stacia, that there's a fairly protracted, or may not protracted, but there are things that are going from 75 to 50 million years within the Skagit ice. So we can look at all of those, and with the kinds of precision Mike can get in geochronology, and we can really nail that down perhaps better than in the Mount Stewart, Chewaucum schist area in the 96 to 87 million year flare.
I'm loving this, by the way. I don't know how our live viewers are feeling, but this is exactly what I was hoping for. Let's do a little bit more, and then we're going to come to the live viewers. Anybody, maybe Mike, since he hasn't spoken in the last 10 minutes, are you willing to say, Mike, this is all subduction-generated magmas, and we just have some quiet times, but it's ongoing subduction during this whole chalkboard? Yes or no?
I would say probably not in the Eocene.
Let's start there.
Yeah, there I think there's a lot of good geophysical evidence, and that you can see Siletzia attached to a subducted kind of like dangling slab that's still underneath North America. That we accreted something and then ripped up the plate that was subducting that it was attached to. And those, you get really weird magmas in that Eocene bunch, like things that don't normally form in subduction zones. Like part of the Golden Horn is peralkaline, which is not. It's got like big blue amphiboles in it, which is very odd.
Let me pause you right there. So the Golden Horn keeps coming up. Obviously, it's unique for many reasons. The paper is waiting for our viewers for your work on the Golden Horn 5-6 years ago. Do you have evidence that the Golden Horn fed a volcano? And what kind of volcanic system was it? And is there any chance the tuffs in the Chumstick are tied to that?
Well, thank you very much for asking that question, Nick. I think so. And if you look at our map, the southern part of the Golden Horn looks like there's a downdropped block, which is kind of circular, which kind of looks like it could be part of a caldera system. And then one of the tuffs down in the Chumstick does match up like the biggest intrusive body in the Golden Horn. Their ages match up pretty well. So I think there's a story there, definitely. But it would have, at least part of it would have fed very large eruptions.
Very
maybe
cool.
Not quite Yellowstone size, but large.
Yeah. So you guys have been working with Jeff Tepper, obviously, and he has this rollback thing, his model. Bob, or anybody, before you started dealing with Jeff Tepper and that data, were you thinking subduction? And Stacia,
Well, I
I'm
think
still surprised. Go ahead, Bob. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh no, certainly the standard view that I had and many people had was that it was just arc magnetism. We called it the arc,
With subduction.
and then going back to the 1960s at least, Peter Misch, when he first I think saw the golden horn, and then with the work people did on the Duncan Hill and Cooper Mountain, it was recognized that there was a change in the chemistry of the plutons, or at least just petrography, that, as Mike said, it's not just the golden horn. Tonalite dominated the, which is more typical of the coast batholith as a whole. And then in the Eocene, there was this change, but it wasn't really till we had the geochronology, I think, in part, where we recognized this gap through basically through Sam Bowering's students' work, including Mike's and others, Aaron Shea, that we realized between 60 and 50 there really were no plutons of any size, and that got us thinking more about low angle subduction, and then somewhere around there where ridge subduction, ridge people started proposing on Vancouver Island the ridge subduction, then that event that got us thinking, and at least in my mind, then that was sort of our hypothesis. And I think in the grant that funded Mike's PhD work, haven't read that in a long time, but around 2008 or something like that, we started thinking. Daryl wrote that important paper in 2003 on the Chugach and the Ridge Trench. So that I think is when I got started. And Jeff's really been the one to, it wasn't trying to make a pun, but to roll with the rollback story and come up with that and what it might mean. So, I think it was kind of the way science often works, where we're all sort of honing in on the same general idea.
Well, so it feels like at least two of you are backing away from subduction as an active mechanism here. But Stacia, I thought the sediment introduction was tied to a subduction slab story, and if you're saying the sediment story is Eocene, then are you wanting subduction in the Eocene then?
No, it's just in the isotopes you see them becoming a bit more evolved, which would suggest some more crustal component.
Okay.
But I would assume that's more, is that correct, Mike? That seems like that's what you see, but I'm assuming that's more that you're just getting this really voluminous magnetism due to that slab window and everything of Stacia, and that's actually melting some of the crust just as it's going and passing through it. So it's not actually new sediment being introduced, it's just that existing crust that we have there from all these prior events that you have on the chalkboard there. Mm-hmm. And that some of that is just melting when you have this super voluminous magnetism of the Eocene.
I see.
So I'm with those two. Not true arc magnetism in the Eocene.
And going down, just to finish the thought then, so this can be quick. Everybody's agreeing it's a true arc and it's a subducting plate for our late Cretaceous magmas?
As far as we know.
Okay. Mike?
Yeah, I'm happy with
it.
Okay. That's, Stacia can remind us on the timing, but that's like when we're shoving sediments under the arc. And so
is that my confusion? Wait a minute. So that is the sediment story here, but it's not going into the magmas, it's going underneath the arc?
Or into the middle of it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, sorry.
Okay. No, that's me. That's me. And finally, down here in the early days, I do realize it's not your focal point now, but Bob was in the Wenatchee block. It was nothing but this, right, Bob, for your first 15 years or something.
Sure.
So, I don't know. Should we get into it a little bit? Like, Is this subduction? Is it eastward subduction? Is it westward subduction? Is it slab failure? I know we can't do this in 3 minutes, and the live viewers are wanting to ask questions, but I'm just.
I think it's eastward. I think it's eastward subduction, but I definitely think it's subduction. I have trouble with that being purely break off, in part because we see plutons of that age going from the peninsular ranges up to southeast Alaska, and they intrude different terrains. So, and again, it really depends where you put the strike slip faults. It comes back to Baja, BC.
Oh, yeah.
And all of this discussion, even about the Okanagan, and if the Okanagan was, because it would be part of the Intermontane, and Mount Stewart is, that's whether for better or worse, it's the original Baja BC body, right? So if it was 1,500 kilometers to the southeast relative to the Okanagan, you really got to think differently about how. Of course, yeah. So hopefully you'll resolve all this in the winter, so you can tell us what's really going on. But anyway, I don't see the evidence for some localized slab breakoff just because we're not even localized, just because of the length of that. That's a huge pulse of magmatism along the length of the Cordillera, even in Patagonia. So.
Well, it should be obvious now why we've been so regimented, like we're keeping the Baja BC thing out. I think Chris Mattin's in the middle of a sentence. I'm like, stop, next winter, stop. So I just can't handle it. I don't think anybody here can handle it. And it'll be fun to try to get some of that going. Live viewers, you've been patient. Thank you. It's 10:15. Do you guys all have another 10, 15 minutes to answer some questions? Okay, it's afternoon there, Mike. I'm sorry, I'm cutting into your Saturday. Uppercase, I'm just going to ask, and if any of you guys can see the questions, feel free to jump on anything that looks good to you. Chris asks Mike, have you or others compared any of the geochem in this area to what is seen in the Colorado-Utah volcanics 38 to 25 million years ago? Are there any similarities? Have you done any work in Nevada, I guess, or Utah or Colorado, Mike?
Well, yeah, we started working on some plutons down in Nevada that are Oligocene through Miocene extensional as the basin range is forming. I haven't really thought about comparing the magma compositions, so no, I can't really speak to that, but I would point out that things go nuts in the southern part of North America at a different time.
Yeah.
But it could be reflecting some of the similar processes that we've been talking about, right? Like what's happening at the margin.
That crazy Miocene in southern Nevada or whatever, it's like, okay. So why are you down there?
Yeah,
right
if you were at UNR, right, you might be talking about the crazy Oligocene if you were doing this video series, right? So it's similar things happen at different times along the margin.
Okay. Well, why are you down there right now? Do you have a grad student down in Nevada? Why are you talking about basin range stuff?
Oh, I got really interested in magmatic systems where you can see the volcanics and the guts as well. And so Nevada's great for that because there are all these normal faults and detachment faults that just like slice things and lay them out horizontally. So it's a good place for that.
Nice. Very cool. Viewers, if you want to ask a particular person, please include their name like that person did. That helps me. Okay, Mike says, Mike and Rick, two different people. Why Eocene extension? Is it Silesia accreting? Is it global reorganization? Is it both? Or is it none of the above? Anybody? Did we already kind of address that? Do we want to say it again?
Stacia, you worked on a core complex. It was a long time ago.
Well, yeah, but I think it all ties into what's happening on those plate margins and just the impact of Silesia and the slab window forming. That kind of drives extension into the upper crust. And so I think that's kind of the main thing that we're seeing of that history. But a lot of it is, yeah, just the plate reorganization and changing how that stress is on the plate boundary.
Well, I'll add just one thing, that I have no idea what the plate reorganization looks like offshore, but it sounds like we all agreed that this is not a subduction story, which means we don't have transpression or head-on convergence. So the era is done, and apparently it's a pretty quick, abrupt switch 53 million years ago across the Pacific Northwest. So this slab window is we don't have a big ocean plate subducting anymore. I think that's what we're all saying. So that could be good enough, I guess. And then some of these over-thickened people just say, it's unsatisfying to me, but they go, well, you got thick crust, and eventually it's just going to start to extend. Like, that doesn't sound sexy enough to me, but is this the timing right to just extend it because the crust is too thick and it's just waiting to go?
Well, the simple-minded idea, I guess, probably I had, but I think that Tekla alluded to is you're kind of holding the thick crust up.
Oh, right.
And then when the plate vectors change, which Stacia just mentioned, then it's much easier for it to collapse. And that's why I would see, starting with those dikes, why I would see, well, we know there's more east-west extension, say in the Shoe Swap or Priest River, Kettle, whatever your favorite core complex there is in northeastern Washington. And that the effects of strike slip become much more important to the west, as Stacia answered that early question about core complexes. So whether North Cascades is a core complex. So I think the thick crust probably had played a role. I'm not sure what Stacia and Mike think, but more inboard, and that gets at the whole question that Basil raised: how far inboard did the collision of Silesia drive deformation? And I would say, at least as far as the Skagit Gneiss complex, but probably not too much farther east.
I got to keep coming to the viewers. This is great. I'm scrolling back, looking for uppercase. Blue Sky 720 asks, would mantle flow from the subducted spreading ridge be driving rifting and extension? Mantle flow from the subducted spreading ridge. Is the spreading ridge still active beneath us, or was it at that time?
Sort of.
Okay.
So, all right. So when you have a spreading ridge, your plates are moving apart, right? Mantle decompresses, triggers some melting. But when you're at the seafloor, that magma, that basalt erupts and solidifies into basalt, and you get your oceanic crust. So after you've subducted two plates, they're still getting pulled in different directions, right? So they're still diverging, they're still moving out of the way, and there's still an impetus to have mantle flow into the space that they were previously occupying. So that mantle will decompress and melt. The difference is it's not erupting and solidifying as basalt anymore. So instead you have basalt that can then go up into the overlying crust. So that basaltic melt. So yes, the same sort of thing is happening below the continent at this time, but you're not making new oceanic crust, and you're just making basalt.
Good answer. You're good with your hands, Mike. That Mike Eddy, he's good with his hands. Patrick, age 8. Are there any old theories that were abandoned as false that you've picked up again and are finding to be true now. Thank you for today. Love, Patrick. Well, Bob, any ideas that were hip 50 years ago that everybody thought was ridiculous and now we're using them again?
Well, in specifically to the Pacific Northwest, let's see, 50 years ago, I didn't live here then, so I was lowly in Pennsylvania, but
all right.
no, that was right when plate tectonics came out. So certainly, as a naive grad student, I thought, well, gee, what's going to be left to figure out? People, or it's just a convergent margin and it drives this, or it's extension. And if you ever went to a GSA talk, Geological Society of America talk in the 1970s, it was all, well, these rocks represent an arc, and this is, and it all seemed like it was simple now, but of course, we knew that wasn't the case. But I'm trying to think of a specific one for the Pacific Northwest. I can't think of any right off the bat.
Well, let's spin it slightly differently. Anybody here, most of you, all three of you are extremely well read. You know all the work that's been done in your area for the last 30, 40 years, I'm guessing. Was somebody ahead of the curve? Like somebody was doing some unusual work, using a different, unusual technique, or in an area that didn't make any sense, and now 2 decades later, let's say, everybody's like, oh, okay. That person was way ahead of where we are now.
Well,
Certainly Merle Beck. I'm sorry, Mike. You want to go ahead? I just throw Merle Beck doing paleomag on the Mount Stewart batholith. Someone might have said why. It's a and still probably would say why, because to know why it's horizontal, why assume it hasn't been tilted, but that's certainly whether he solved it or not, he certainly created a lot of subsequent research and money to go to people to work in the Pacific Northwest from the National Science Foundation. So that was really good.
Mike?
I was just going to say, in general, every time I read a master's thesis from up there, I don't know, master's theses at the end, right? You're trying to tie it all together, and so you write your 3 or 4 different ways it could all work. And some of them are kind of crazy ideas, but you're just speculating at the end so you can get away with it. And I would say probably about 20% of those that I read in old theses turned out, the crazy idea turned out to be something that people are thinking about now. And they just, they recognize that maybe that was how it worked, but didn't have the data to conclusively show it. So it kind of just a speculative paragraph at the end of the thesis.
Can you think of an example?
From a thesis, no. So something that I'm realizing now out in the Olympic Peninsula is, so the Crescent Formation, a big pile of basalts, is split into lower and upper. And one of the original papers in the 70s about it said that they were in fault contact in different ages, and then really gained no traction. And then now we go out there and we try and date it, and it looks like, they're very different in age. And it ends up resolving a lot of issues, because one we think is telling a rifting extensional story, which is what everyone was so keen on for a long time, and then the other is more the Silesia story. But that, that's an idea that kind of got shelved for 40, 50 years now.
There you go, Patrick. There you go. 3 more questions. I'll find.
I've got to ask real fast. I've got to tease Mike.
Good.
You probably never read my master's thesis, huh?
I have not, Bob. You put me on the spot.
Oh God,
well, he
this is
doesn't
getting ugly.
I've been trying to talk Stacia and Mike into going to the Ingalls complex for as long as I've known them, with no success. So I just had to tease Mike.
Okay. I've got 2 for Stacia. This is dealer's choice, Stacia. 1 from Joe. Stacia, how did your garnet search help verify age of Spreading Ridge? or this other one from Robert. Stacia, do all the core complexes form at the same time, and were they linked together somehow? Either one.
Okay, I can start with the garnet one. It doesn't really tell us that much about the spreading ridge, but we're hoping that some of the information we can get from those garnets will tell us when those rocks in the crystalline core are starting to decompress and starting to be moving towards the surface. And so ultimately, that probably is intimately connected to Silesia and the spreading ridge interacting with the margin. So, you know, in a way, you can kind of tie those together, hopefully, depending on how things go. And then the core complexes, they're actually pretty interesting because they do run anywhere from, or all the way from southeastern British Columbia down into the southern US into northern Mexico. And there is kind of belts that people kind of categorize them into a northern, a central, and a southern. And overall, the history gets younger as you go south. And you're also exhuming more shallow rocks as you go south. So the ones in the north in BC and Washington and even down into Nevada, you are seeing kind of rocks that were coming from the mid-crust up to the surface, whereas that's not the case in Arizona. And then the extension ages get younger as you go south.
I think I got one more, maybe for Stacia from Papagino. Could the side pressure from squeezing cause metamorphic changes mimicking depth pressure changes? Could the side pressure from squeezing cause metamorphic changes mimicking depth pressure changes?
I suppose it could change kind of how your crust is ductily flowing. And, you know, we kind of think of it as potentially flowing both horizontally at times as well as later vertically. And so in that sense, you know, that I'm not sure exactly what squeezing they're referring to, but that could cause the flow to change more towards a vertical flow, which would then definitely affect the mineral reactions occurring in the rock.
Thank you. A bunch of people asking, did we get the answer to the insular intermontane question for the crystalline core? And that's probably going to be revisited next winter with our series, but Bob, you did kind of lead us towards thinking intermontane for many of the rocks in the crystalline core. Are you still leaning that way for now?
Well, I guess for at least the Triassic rocks that of what's called the Marble Mount Dumbbell belt with Cascade River schist, although Kirsten Sauer with Stacia has shown that some of that's actually Cretaceous, which has made it even more interesting. But Margie Russmore and people like that have argued that that's what we think is equivalent. One of Daryl's former PhD students have argued that the equivalent on the other side of the Fraser Fault in British Columbia, that's tied to Stachenia, which would put it on intermontane. Jim Monger, the Canadian tectonicist, Jim called those, he has these, what he calls small terrains sort of captured between the intermontane and the insular. And I kind of like that because there are things like the Bridge River, which we would call Napiqua, we think is the metamorphosed Bridge River, which are in between what's pretty clearly part of the intermontane and what's clearly insular. And they would argue, or he proposed, that these were sort of flotsam and jetsam caught in between those two super terrains. And so those are the rocks that come down into Washington. I guess I've thought that maybe Wrangellia of the insular is probably underneath Mount Stewart. That those rocks were under thrust beneath the Ingalls and Chewaucom schist, but that's pretty speculative.
Well,
So that would mean both, potentially.
Yeah, okay. Well, that's a perfect springboard to next winter, and I'm hoping to not only keep talking about this stuff with you guys this summer, but also be nice to have you back next winter and we can speculate more on this. Before we sign off with you guys, what is the plan this summer? Which students will you have with you? Will we be getting together, all four of us, at some point in the summer? So Stacia, who have you got working with you this summer? When do you plan on being in the North Cascades?
The same graduate student that was there last summer, Alex Swingville, will be back up and doing some mapping. And she'll probably head up, or together we'll head up late July, probably time period.
Okay.
And she's been doing a lot of work in kind of the central Skagit. So in between the northern Lake Chelan and kind of south of Colonial Creek Campground, for those that know that area.
Mm-hmm.
And that's an area where we don't have a lot of data on kind of the metamorphic history and how the pressures and temperatures evolved through time. So she's going to work on that and collecting fabric data and that sort of thing.
And that's what you'll be doing as well, kind of working with her, or do you have another objective for yourself personally this summer?
Well, we've been emailing a bit, the three of us, and one thing is potentially trying to go up into Canada to see the Skagit equivalent across the border, because I've never seen those rocks, and Bob always talks about how interesting they are. So that's one part of kind of the summer objective too.
On the west side of the Fraser Fault?
On the, let's see, it'd be on the east side of the Fraser Fault.
On the east side?
Yeah. No.
So why is there Skagit in Canada that's also on the east side of the Fraser?
Where, well, think about the Straight Creek Fault going up. I can't do it backwards. We're looking at that little bit, the tippy top of the triangle there.
Oh, I got it. I got it.
Yeah.
Oh, cute. All right. You keep one foot in the States and do your work in Canada. That's great. Mike, you're going to be up in Alaska with Aaron Donaghy, our old friend, for a while, but you're going to be in the North Cascades as well with a different grad student?
Yeah, I'll come earlier in the summer. We haven't nailed down dates, but probably the end of June, first week of July.
Okay.
And his name is Sorav Karmakar, so he's a brand new graduate student. And I think we're going to focus on sampling the plutons from that middle flare-up. So we're going to go around the range and sort of figure out what he's, what sort of hiking and camping he's comfortable with, and then use that as a way to design his project. And then, yeah, the second half of July, we're going to go up to Alaska to the Yakutat terrain, which is supposed to be the other half of Silesia, and see if we can make a story about it sliding up
Cool.
to Alaska. And then I'll try and swing back through on my way back. I'll try and stop in Seattle and then pop over and meet the three of you guys.
You promise? You promise you'll swing back?
I'm gonna, yeah, I think that'll work.
Okay. I hope so.
It's not that far, you know, from
No, that's right.
like Juneau down to Seattle. So.
That's right. No, that's right. How about you, Bob?
Well, I have a master's student who started this year, Jeff Wagner.
Wow.
He was a Western Washington undergrad, and he grew up in Bellingham as well. So he knows the country, or at least knows what he's getting into. And he'll be working on the Skagit south of where Stacia was talking about with her in the central Skagit. This would be more between Lake Chelan and the divide between the Twist River and Lake Chelan, for those who know the geography. So he would be working in an area to the south. A master's student, Erin Shea of mine, who then went on to do her PhD at MIT, overlap Mike. She worked right up to the Cooper Mountain batholith, and then there's another master's student, Zach Michaels, who worked up around Stehekin and ironically ended up getting a PhD with Basel. So they're all kind of working different things. But between those two areas, there's quite a gap. And one of the issues in the Skagit is it's really hard to map out individual bodies. Well, you saw Gary Paul's pictures. You can imagine why it's not like walking around in low-lying desert. But that is one area where we have some map units, and there's enough high cirques, and if the countryside's easier to get around in. And so that's the hope. And he'd be doing structural and trying to map out how big units are, and then doing the kinds of things that Mike and Stacia and Alex did last summer, where we really look for places where we can see a strongly deformed body intruded by a less deformed body, and then maybe cross-cut by a dike, where we could then tie try and get at the timing of the structures. So anyway, that, and then I probably tag along with Mike and Sorev in the beginning for a few days at least, and definitely going up to BC, and just the problem, and this is why, like your question about the Skagit, is the Chilliwack batholith, which Jeff Tepper did his PhD on. That batholith cuts off the Skagit, so we don't see it right up at the border, but just across the border there is Skagit. Just goes up to right around the town of Hope, British Columbia. Cool. So it's easy to see that if you know where Hope is. So
yeah, totally.
Right on the Trans-Canada Highway.
Sure.
And so those are my plans.
Nice. Well, speaking of tagging along, I don't want to be desperate or anything, but I'm hoping I can hang out with any of these little excursions. I'll bring my iPhone and we'll just record a little bit. I don't know if all four of us will get together or not, but it'd just be fun much of the audience now is kind of invested in what's going on. So I hope I can tag along at least a little bit this summer with a combination of you guys. Yeah. Well, I think that's enough, and I can't thank you guys enough for being part of this morning. It was a wild idea I had a few weeks ago, and I'm happy with it. I hope you felt okay, and please enjoy the rest of your weekend, and we'll check in with you this summer. Thank you.
Thanks, Nick.
Okay, we'll see you. Bye-bye. Bye. Okay, one at a time. I'm getting rid of you guys. Mike, you're going first. Goodbye, Mike. And, oh yeah, look at that. So Stacia, thank you again, and we'll see you soon. Goodbye.
Bye.
And Bob Miller. Thank you, Bob. I really, it's always a thrill to talk to you. You know so much, and you're able to be patient with folks like us who are just starting to think about this. So special thanks to you.
Thank you, Nick. You did a great job.
Thank you. We'll see you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
The Dream Team, North Cascades Geology. Thank you for all your questions. I'm sorry we got to just a few of them. That's the way things go. We got about 1,000 watching. And instead of answering more of your questions, although I see them right here, okay, that's what I was going to finish with. A bunch of you right now are saying, what happens next? What's happening this spring? And so on. So I do want to talk about what's next. But before I do that, let me grab one folder that says end of show. So I would like to thank all of the geologists who joined us this winter. It was an experiment, and I'm very pleased with it. And I hope that you enjoyed getting a chance to meet all of them and get a sense of how they operate and how they think and in many cases, taking a little peek behind the curtain and see where we are with some of these thoughts before the ideas are written in stone. So, would you allow me? Thank you in order of appearance to Jerome Lessman, Nanaimo, British Columbia; Basil Tikoff, Madison, Wisconsin; Bob Miller, San Jose, California; Rob Thomas, Dillon, Montana; Daryl Cowan, Seattle, Washington; Aaron Donaghy, West Lafayette, Indiana; Ray Wells, Portland, Oregon; Mike Eddy, West Lafayette, Indiana; Matt McClincy, Portland, Oregon; Jeff Tepper, Tacoma, Washington; Spencer Houston from Houston, Texas; Karin Siglock, Nice, France; Dave Rogers, Pocatello, Idaho; Robinson Cecil, Los Angeles, California; Caleb Scarberry, Butte, Montana; Stacia Gordon, Reno, Nevada; Chris Mattinson, Ellensburg, Washington; and Tekla Harms, Amherst, Massachusetts. They could easily say no. They could easily say I'm too busy. They could easily say, who are you? I've never heard of you. But they all said yes. I was only denied once when I asked somebody. I think it was more nerves than anything else. Okay? So that's the end of the Crazy Eocene A to Z. This has been a live stream series. 2 live streams per week with a live audience and a couple of science papers every show. I love the format. It helps me get through the winter. And it seems to be working. So if you like this live stream approach and you like the level of detail, I know for some it's too much. I know for some you're like, I can't, this is too much. I can't deal with it. I can't keep it straight. I'm going to stop. Well, I'll talk about you guys in a second. But for those that like this level of detail, you're up to the challenge of learning these kind of hardcore geology things. I love this format, and I'm going to continue next winter. I've already made that announcement. But I guess I'm formally announcing it now. So Mount Stewart Pluton, north of Ellensburg, Washington, is the centerpiece of a concept called Baja BC. Somebody sent me this a while back. There's Mount Stewart with a Mexican flag on it. And so 9 months from now, mid-November of 2022, we will start the next live stream series. Baja BC A to Z. Similar in timing, similar in frequency. I don't know if it'll be Wednesdays and Saturdays, and I don't know if I'll be doing Mellon, and I don't know if I'll have live guests. I don't know much, but I want the Baja BC thing to be similar to this series, and I want it not to be a cheerleading session. I don't want everybody in the series to be pro Baja BC. I want everybody. I want the most staunch anti-Baja BC people as well as the people who are deeply in love with Baja BC and everybody in between. I think all 3 of our guests were in between, to be honest with you. So if you're a fan only of the live stream series and the content, Baja BC is coming to you in November. If you missed some of these earlier live streams, there's, 25 shows that I did in spring talking about the Eocene. So I was learning some of the Eocene stuff with my students in spring of 2021. You can find that at nickzentner.com. Not secure. If you really feel like you're in over your head and you just want some 101 stuff, there's 25 of these live streams that you can watch in replay. And yeah, I did a live stream series that I've referred to pretty regularly more than a year ago. And those are also available on my YouTube channel for you to watch. So I don't know if you've seen all these or just some of them or just today. It's the first time you're with us. I don't know. But there's plenty in that live stream format that's there for you. And yes, what I'm saying is I'm not doing another live stream series until November, which is 9 months from now. So am I really saying that I'm not doing anything here on this YouTube channel for 9 months? Of course not. I'm not saying that. I'm addicted to you. I'm addicted to this. I cannot stop. I need a break, for sure. But there's too much good stuff here. There's just too much positive here for me to just be dead for 9 months and not do anything. But it's not going to be a schedule, and it's not going to be a live stream series. So let me share just verbally before I sign off my thoughts. I guess what you need to do, if you haven't already, is make sure you've hit the subscribe button on this YouTube channel. It's free. You don't have to pay anything. It's free. And notify or turn on your bells and whistles. Turn on your notifications. If you want to kind of keep up with what is going on this spring, this summer, and this fall. There's no schedule. And I like that. That sounds appealing about right now. Like there might be a week or 2 weeks where there's nothing. And there might be a week in April where there's a video every day. There might be 2 videos in one day. I don't know. Like it's based on weather, it's based on who I'm visiting with, it's based on what I'm interested in and how excited I am about a certain topic. So that's going to have to be our agreement between now and November, that there is no schedule. And many of those videos will be pre-recorded. They won't be live. We won't have this live chat. And some of you have seen some of those before, in past summers, for instance. I'll take a hike with Liz, bring the iPhone along, record it, barely edit it, and post it without fanfare. Conversations with people, record it, interview people, like in their backyards or out driving somewhere. Randy Lewis, haven't seen him in 9 months. Other Native Americans, hopefully. That's an interest of mine. Ice Age floods, great lavas, out at the coast, new tsunami stuff. I mean, it's time for me to take a break from thinking about the North Cascades. As much as I've been enjoyed it, there's lots of other kinds of geology out there. I've got them flagged in my little emails, by topic, by color. I use the flags in Mac Mail. So I got, all sorts of stuff that I've just put off because I've been busy with you guys with this North Cascades thing. So I'm saying there's going to be no schedule. There's going to be no theme or any organization whatsoever. I'm just going to kind of roll with whatever I'm thinking about and share it with you as often as I can. But there's no obligation for me to do things at a certain time, which I like, especially at the moment. I think I'm also going to be focusing on what's going on in this building. I really haven't talked about this collection of geologists that I work with or the grad students that are here at Central Washington University's Geology Department or the undergrads here. And so I've already told some of the professors who I think will be back to normal, I hope, in spring, and we'll go out on field trips and use the vans and everything. I think I'm just going to tag along with Lisa Ely's geomorphology class or Hannah Shamlou's volcanology field trip or whoever. Or visit with Chris Mattinson, do some lab work and film that. So for a number of reasons, I think the timing is right to put a big old spotlight on this department, which I really haven't done to this point. And finally, I have lots of interest in doing more of these pop-up geology things. Now, some of you attended or at least watched what I was doing last fall. I was experimenting with this idea called pop-up geology, where on my YouTube channel I announce a location the GPS location, the day, the time, like 48 hours in advance. And I say, whoever's interested, I'm going to be out at this coulee floor at this time on this day. And bring a camp chair, and we'll just kind of set up a little flash mob thing. We'll have a little party. I'll give a lecture, and I will live stream it. So if you don't care about the content here, you just like being in a community of live viewers, then there won't be a schedule, but there will be some live events, some pop-up geology events. And I will post the announcements, and a couple days later, because the weather's good or whatever, we'll do it, and you'll be able to be included in those, even if you're watching from a long way away. I like that format. Just starting to kind of play with options with that. And so that'll be another thing that I'm up to. So there'll be plenty. Last thing I want to, last thing I want to say before we quit. You've heard it a million times from me. I get way too many emails for me to reply to each one. So that will continue. Thank you for all the feedback. Thank you for all the emails. Thank you for all the phone messages. Thank you for all the direct messages on Instagram and everything else. You know, you just don't have time to reply to everything. You've heard that. But you haven't heard this, and I'm going to try it. I might regret it, but I'm going to try saying it anyway. I continue to hear from a lot of people saying basically this: thank you for doing this. I really appreciate learning all this stuff. It's exciting. But there's always a third thing, and they say, I hope you get what you're trying to get. I hope you meet your goal. And what they're saying is, I don't understand why you're doing all this, and you must be trying to get some sort of promotion or some sort of big contract or TV program or book deal or some plaque or some award, or you must be motivated by that. It's not just one or two people, it's a lot of people. And again, I want to thank you for contacting me, and I'm glad that you're enjoying this. And I've said it a number of times, haven't I, here? I do it because I enjoy this, and I enjoy that there's no money involved in this, and yet people they just don't believe me. Some of you, I don't think you just believe me. There's got to be some other motivation for this. So here's what I want to say. There have been awards. There have been book deals offered. There has been all sorts of recognition. But it's a hollow experience. That's the only word I have for you. It's a hollow experience. And you're like, to be given an award, it's a hollow experience? Yes, you know why? The organization or the person who's up on the podium saying all these wonderful things about you, they're not here. They don't know what this is. You're recognized for excellence, and nobody in the room knows what the excellence is. It's all just a rumor. Oh, I heard that guy's doing some really amazing stuff. That's nice, but nobody has a sense of what this is. So what I'm trying to say is, and maybe this is the way that will finally kind of satisfy some of you, the Emmy Awards or whatever it is, national whatever, that's the hollow thing. This is the opposite of hollow. This is why I keep coming back. Am I looking for recognition? I don't have to look for recognition. It's here. It's here scrolling right now. That's why I keep coming back. It's selfish. It feels good that you're here and you're positive and you're warm and welcoming to anybody who stumbles into this place. I don't go around town talking about all this thing here because nobody gets it. They're just confused. So it's like, why bother? I'm not going to. So does that give you a different take on this? Look, what am I going to do with a bunch more money anyway? What am I going to buy another pair of shoes, or going to buy a boat? Or I wouldn't know what to do. We lead a simple life. So that other stuff has happened, and it doesn't mean much to me compared to what this is. This is the meaningful thing. This is the good stuff. Whatever the opposite of hollow is, that's what this is. A toast to you. Here's to you. Here's to your enthusiasm and your commitment to all of this. It's not just the learning, it's just being in a place where we don't have to think about all the other stuff going on in the world. Here's to you. Here's to our guests today, 3 of them. Dr. Bob Miller from San Jose State University. Dr. Stacia Gordon from University of Nevada, Reno. Whoa. From University of Nevada, Reno. Or maybe it's just called University of Nevada now. Here's to you, Stacia. Here's to Mike Eddy, Dr. Michael Eddy from Purdue University in West Lafayette, Indiana. And here's to all those guests that I just read off the sheet. What a thrill. That's also recognition that these folks are willing to come on here. They see what's going on. That means way more to me than some golden statue. So this is it. If you're a calendar person, this will be happening again in mid-November of 2022. And until then, I say thank you, I love you, and goodbye from Ellensburg, Washington, USA. It's very clear our love is here to stay, not for a year, forever and a day. Outside the Rockies may crumble, Gibraltar may tumble, they're only made of clay. But our love is here to stay. Not for a year, forever and a day. In time the Rockies may crumble, Gibraltar may tumble. Thanks, Kay. They're only made of clay. Our love is here to stay. Ah I cleaned out the closet, obviously. Outside the running on the phone, and on the fan of fame, come to do. Boom, 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 boom. Boom, 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 boom. It's very clear our love is here to stay.